So welcome everybody to the next event in the Earth Science Women's Network event series. This time it's an event all about demystifying the Natural Environment Research Council Independent Research Fellowships. So this is the second in a two-part series, and this time we will be focusing on interviews. We're joined by a really great panel, mix of speakers from NERC and from universities, from people that have experience about the IRF from different angles. And we're really excited to have them here today and for you to join us as well. So a little bit about what to expect during today's event. So we'll have a quick welcome and announcements, which is happening right now, followed by some introductions from our panelists. Then a quick presentation on the NERC IRF interviews from James Box for about 20 minutes. Followed by the panel discussion and a question and answer session. And then we'll also have a breakout session where you'll be able to meet all of our speakers within a breakout room. And then the event will close. If you have any technical issues or questions during the event, send these through to me. So I am labeled questions at ESWN in the chat, and those will come directly to me. Also, as a disclaimer, this is an Earth Science Women's Network hosted event with speakers from NERC. So a bit of housekeeping, please remember to abide by ESWN's Code of Conduct, which will be dropped in the chat very shortly. So you all will sign this when you registered. If you somehow found yourself here without having signed this, please take a moment to go to our website and have a look at this. All aspects of this event, except the breakouts, are being recorded for those who can't join us and would like to participate asynchronously. This event is fully closed captioned, and you can activate the captions using the CC button at the bottom of your screen. If you hide the captions for you, it won't hide it for anybody else. You'll be muted for the duration of the event. If you find that you can unmute yourself, please don't, so that we can keep a nice quiet environment for our speakers. As another reminder, send your questions through to me at questions@ESWN. Share your thoughts within the chat. As the event progresses. We're all virtual, we're not in person, so definitely tell us what you're thinking and what you'd like to know. If you have any tech issues, also send them through to questions@ESWN via the chat. So a little bit about the Earth Science Women's Network, if you haven't come across us before. So ESWN is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity across the geosciences, with an emphasis on creating and supporting a nurturing community, working for cultural change to eliminate barriers to a diverse scientific workforce, and empowering scientists through professional development. We encourage you to join the network if you are not a member. So now a little bit about NERC and the IRF. So the Natural Environment Research Council, which we abbreviate to NERC, is the UK's leading public funder of environmental science. It funds a range of things, so research, postgraduate training, and innovation within academia and research centres. Its current 3-year budget from 2022 through to 2025 is £925 million. And the Independent Research Fellowship itself is an early career researcher funding scheme, which provides funding for 5 years. And James will tell you more about this during his talk. So why did we choose to host the event? Whole range of reasons. So we ran a member event survey last summer. And one thing that was a really prominent theme was that everyone who responded really wanted more non-US focused funder events. It's the second in a 2-part series. So remember to check out part 1 on applications on YouTube. ESWN really wants to support its early career members. And also we would like to promote careers inside and outside academia. So next week we have an event all about government careers, which we encourage you to join. And also ultimately to set you up for IRF success. So now to introduce today's speakers and panel. So we have James Box from NERC, and James will present a short talk about the IRF interviews. We have Emily Mitchell, Jennifer Morris, Clare Warren, and Carol Robinson from a range of places. So Jenny is program manager at NERC. So we have a mix of NERC and non-NERC folks on the panel, and they'll be taking part in the panel discussion. So now I'm going to hand over to our speakers to each introduce themselves, starting with James.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us today. So I am James Box, Senior Programme Manager within NERC. within the talent and skills team, primarily leading on our fellowship schemes, which includes IRF that we're going to talk about today, but also KE, so our knowledge exchange fellowship scheme. I've been working at NERC now for around 8 years. And for those of you that were here last time, you'll see a slightly, not come through yet, but there will be an update that's a very important update to a change that's happened within the family, which is a new cat. So I think that's important to mention. But thank you very much for this opportunity.
Hi everyone, I'm Carol Robinson. I'm a Professor of Marine Sciences at the University of East Anglia, and I held a NERC Advanced Research Fellowship way back in the dark ages, something like 1996. I've also been on NERC peer review panels on and off for almost 20 years, and I was the panel chair for the IRF Panel B in 2020 and 2022. I've also been on the review and interview panels for ERC Starter and Consolidator grants, and the review panel for Marie Curie Fellowships. And I'm really pleased to be here, as I think this type of discussion and event and the Earth Science Women's Network as a whole are really beneficial. So thank you for having me.
Hi everybody, a bit like Carol, I also held NERC fellowships in the previous iterations when there was a 3-year, I guess it was called a junior fellowship and a 5-year senior fellowship. So I held those until 2016, I think, when my last one finished. And since then, I've been made permanent, which of course is great. And then now recently a professor here at the Open University. I'm a metamorphic geologist, so any kind of sort of geology type questions, I'm happy to answer. What else? I've sat on panels before as well for NERC for both the IRFs. Recently, I think the last one I sat on was 2020, when we suddenly had to scrabble around and interview people online for the first time. So that was interesting. Much more common now, of course. And also in some of the other funding streams for NERC as well. So I'm super excited to be here, and I hope that I can answer any questions you might have.
Hi everyone, it's really lovely to be here. I am a current NERC Research Fellow. I'm just starting my 4th year, and also as of October I'm an Assistant Professor in the Department of Zoology in Cambridge, as well as being the Curator of Invertebrates in the museum. So my work is paleobiology, specifically the starts of animal life during the Ediacaran. But I also do some modern ecological work as well. So I'm more than happy to talk about the process of applying. In terms of reviewing for NERC, I am on the peer review panel and have reviewed some grants as well. Look forward to chatting to you all in a bit.
Hello everyone, my name's Jenny Morris. I'm a Programme Manager in NERC, and I currently sit in a Discovery Science and Highlight Topics team. And I've supported the IRF scheme in the past as a panel secretary, and this includes ensuring that each of the proposals are reviewed by the right experts and selecting the panel members and coordinating the panel meeting itself. So I'm here to kind of answer the questions from the NERC perspective around the interview panel. Before I joined NERC, I was also a researcher in paleobotany and studied some of the earliest plants to evolve on the land. That's about me.
Nice. Thanks so much to everyone for introducing themselves. It's really great to have all of you here. So now I'm going to hand over to James Box for a talk all about the IRF interviews.
Thank you again, Ray, Matt. And again, thank you everyone for joining this. If you were here for the previous talk, then welcome again. If you were here for the first time, then again, really pleased to have you here. And hopefully you got a chance to watch the video that was put up of this done previously. So this presentation, as it says, is going to talk about the interview panels, which is a part of a process that we run as part of IRF. And it's something we refer to as the decision-making part of the process. So following the interviews that happen, the panel put in place a ranked list to NERC, and using that information, NERC then go and look at the money that we have available and make a decision based on the two parts of the process. So quickly, just to run through the background, I'll explain a bit more who I am, about NERC and about IRF. So for those of you that were here last time, it's a slimmed down version of that. But for those of you who aren't aware of who we are, what we do, I thought it was important just to make sure that you kind of have the setting of this process. Very, very a quick recap on IRF as a process up until the interview, and then I'll go into more detail about the interview itself, going through the structure of the interview process and spending a bit of time there, and then discussing with you what happens after the interview, which is called the post-award process. So a bit about me, who am I? So I'm James, a dad of 2 girls. I went to University of East Anglia, so big shout out to anyone who's from or went to UEA, and I studied for a master's degree in chemistry. I've now been working at NERC for 7, potentially 8 years. Honestly, my perception as time has been completely trashed by COVID. There we go. But I've been in my current position for around about 4 years, which is leading on fellowships. So as I said, we lead on IRF and KE. We support the NERC side of FLF grants. We also work on policy implementation for early career researchers. So a bit about, the talent skills team in NERC. So at the moment we have UKRI. This is the umbrella large organisation that looks after the majority of UK research innovation funding. And you can see here the tiles, there are 7 different research councils, and then making up the final of the 9 is Research England and Innovate UK. But this one in the bottom left, the nice green one, this is the Natural Environment Research Council. This is who we are. Then as part of our funding that gets given to us from the central UKRI funding pot, as Ramat said, that the 935 million across the 3-year period, it gets spread out through a variety of channels to fund environmental research. So the orange or the yellowy bit of the pie, the talent skills bit, this is where fellowships funding comes out of, and you can see that based on everything else, it's a smallish part of the pie, but it's a significant amount of funding available. The other bits you're seeing green, this is all to do with infrastructure, some of the public engagement, overseas development aid, and in some of that as well will come some of the infrastructure projects, so things like our ship or our planes or the BAS centres, things like that. Discovery science is things like the standards rounds, highlight topics, pushing the frontiers, those types of things. And then finally, strategic research is about either bottom up or top fed strategic research that's either got a policy angle or a clear need to be done by either for government reasons, or there might be some research reason associated with it. So within the talent and skills team, that little wedge that we have, what do we spend it on? So it goes into a mixture of things that are all about developing early career researchers, as our name suggests, developing talent and developing skills. And this goes through our studentships, so responsive and directed. These are our DTPs and CDTs. It goes through training schemes, so our advanced training short courses, rep schemes, policy internships, and flexible funding pots for particular training areas that come up. And then on the right, you can see that we have our fellowship schemes. So IRF, as I mentioned before, and KE, and just to mention that we are a supporter of the Daphne Jackson Fellowship Scheme. So Daphne Jackson is a charitable organisation that helps individuals who've spent time away from research for whatever reason. It gives them a platform to get back into research, get their skills back up to a level, and try to make sure that they are able to find an avenue back into full-time employment. As at the bottom here, our core budget is around about 34 million, and this is invested across these 5 different pillars. I said there'd be a slide about cats. So my working from home colleagues who keep me working hard every day, and when things get difficult, come and make sure I'm all right. So for those of you that were here last time, you'll recognise the 2 lads on the right-hand side of your screen, and new to the family is Arwen on the left-hand side. So yes, there is a Lord of the Rings theme going on there. So what is the purpose of an IRF? Why do we invest in this scheme? Why do we keep doing it every year? So for us as a research council, we see it as an excellent way and an excellent opportunity to invest in the next generation of environmental researchers and leaders and pioneers in their particular remit. We have evidence to show from information that was gathered that individuals who finished the new IRF, as Claire said, it's just been a 5-year scheme for about 8 to 9 years now. When we went and had a look at those individuals who had completed the 5 years, we had evidence to show that it was an excellent way of ensuring full-time academic employment at the end of a fellowship. And I appreciate that those of you who are working as postdocs or research assistants know that achieving that full-time academic position is like gold dust. So we really see this as an excellent way of providing individuals in the community with that stepping stone to take themselves from that kind of postdoc, when's my next grant type experience to, I now have a full-time academic career, I have a lab, I have a group, I'm going to be going in this direction. A quick recap of the IRF process before interview then. So once you've submitted your application, if anybody here has submitted their application, then congratulations, well done. I appreciate it's a lot of time and effort that goes into putting all of that together and getting it submitted. So it goes through a level of internal checks. This is to check things like eligibility, a check the remit, just make sure that all the right documents are there and working with you to make sure all of the right information is there and everything's okay. So some of you might be aware, some of you might not, but the big change that we have made to IRF this year for a number of internal and external factors and reasons is the change that we will be making to peer review. So previously, peer review was an external written process. Essentially, we went out to peer reviewers across the globe, sent them your proposal and said, can you give us your opinion of this proposal? Now, as I said, that has created a number of challenges internally within NERC and UKRI and externally within the community. And as a consequence, we've had to change the way that this peer review is being done. So instead of being done by external international peer reviewers, written peer review, it is now going to be done by a reviewing panel made up from the college. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here because this is a presentation about the interviews and I want today to remain a point about the interviews. NERC are running a webinar session to go into more detail about the reasons why we've done this and the implications it has as part of our peer review, and that webinar link will be circulated. So if you do have any questions about that, I prefer not to answer it here today because we have the webinar session and this session is meant to be about interviews. Just to mention about the interviews, they are staying the same. They are still going to be run the same way as they were last year. So all this information that is here today will have been the same had we not changed that. So I just want to make that nice and clear. So coming on to the actual interview then, what happens, you know, when you turn up online now rather than having to travel all the way to Swindon? How does it feel? What types of questions will you be asked? Is it all going to be over quicker than you expect? Yes, it probably will be. So after the SIFT, the panel will give us a number of candidates that they want to be interviewed. These are, from their point of view, from the pool of invites per panel, who they think are the most competitive for interview. So if you are one of these fortunate individuals that the panel think are competitive, you will receive an invitation from NERC. It'll be an email inviting you to attend an interview. We will then agree a date and a time for this interview. The dates are set, they're over 2 days, but we'll work with you to try and make sure that there is a time that is suitable across those 2 days for you. So for example, if you have caring responsibilities, if you've got other important meetings on those days, or for a whole host of reasons, if you come to us and say, I really need to do an early slot, or I'd much rather do a late slot on this day, then fine, talk to us and we'll try and accommodate that situation. Similarly, if you have accessibility needs, so if you have issues with either technology or if you have accessibility needs in terms of, needing additional support from NERC, please let us know at this point, and we'll try and factor that in and make sure that the interview experience that we provide for you is the best one that we can provide, whether that means doing things like extending your interview slot, circulating your presentation slides beforehand with the panel. We'll try and implement things that make sure that you are comfortable with your interview. Once that's been set up, you'll receive a Zoom invite that you will be able to put into your diary, and that when it comes to the actual interview date, you can click on that. You will go into a waiting room, so you don't have to worry about arriving in the middle of somebody else's interview. You will also be given the opportunity, if you wish to test with NERC staff ahead of the interview. This was very prominent, as Claire said, in our first set of interviews, which were a week and a half after the first lockdown. So we wanted to make sure that individuals who are using new pieces of technology and doing things in totally new ways were comfortable and secure with the way they were doing it. We have had people call in from across the globe. We had somebody call in from Singapore last year and from America, and all across the globe. If you are worried about your connection, then please do request an opportunity to test that out. Make sure you can share your screen, make sure that your headset works, make sure that you're able to see everyone clearly, there's no lag time and things like that. And then before the interview, you'll be asked to prepare a presentation, which is essentially an opportunity for you to explore your science, explore your qualities, and basically give you that opportunity to put your application in front of the interview panel. And what we say is we request that a copy is sent to NERC ahead of the panel. This is just in case there are any technical issues and we either need to present it for you and get you to, next slide, please, or something along those lines, or to send to the panel beforehand. But just make sure that we have a copy on hand just in case something does go awry. And of course, one of the things that will go on at an interview is questions. Please to take the opportunity to practice questions, practice a variety of questions. And the questions themselves are not going to be surprising to you. There is clear criteria of how the panel will assess and review and judge your application. And these interview questions will be based off that. You will not be thrown any curveballs for a number of reasons. One, it's not relevant. Two, the panel just doesn't have time. And three, they're not going to be able to use it, and it's not fair on you. So this is the super secret interview structure that gets sent out to panel members in their papers. So this is basically the full a full interview and what it looks like. So as a candidate, you'll enter the room and the chair will get you to introduce yourselves. Don't be surprised if you don't get an individual introduction from each of the panel members. In the interests of time, we try and keep things very tight. And this is something that previous IRF candidates, and if you've been to an interview yourself, will notice everything seems very quick. Part of that reason is because every interview needs to be kept within an hour slot. So you might find that either a chair or a panel member will just ask you just to speed up an answer. Don't take that to heart. Don't take it to mean that you've answered it wrong. Believe me, the panel just want to get through a list of questions to give you the opportunity to present your case. So if it does feel a bit rushed, don't worry. That's not just you that feels rushed. That's also the panel that also feel like they have to go a million miles an hour. But anyway, you'll be brought into the interview, welcomed, and then basically straight away you'll be invited by the chair to present your presentation. So just when you come in, just make sure that you are ready, that you know that you've got your presentation open, that you're ready to share the screen and you've got everything set up, because it will basically be in you come, off you go. Following that, you'll be asked questions, and I'll talk a bit about that in the next couple of slides. And then once you have answered your questions, you'll get an opportunity to ask them yourself, and then you will leave the room or the call or whatever it is. Following this, these extra 20 minutes that you will see as part of the hour slot, you are not actively involved with. This is just for the panel itself, but I thought it'd be a useful opportunity to share this with you. So the first thing here is called silent reflection. And as a dad of 2 small children, silent reflection is my favorite part of the interview structure. Basically, it gives 5 minutes for the panel members just to think about everything they've heard, write some notes, have a look at the proposal, think about what they've heard, bringing everything together. And what we found is that those 5 minutes of silent reflection actually help speed up the panel discussions. Panels come to those discussions after that reflection with the points they want to put across, with a clear view in mind about what kind of scores they want to give. And then the panel discussions happen. And again, this is panel members referring to their criteria, looking at applicants and the interviews, have they provided evidence against each of these bits of the criteria. Following those discussions, scores are made, and then following all of the interviews, we then have what is referred to as a ranking process, which is essentially taking all the interviews over the 2 days in the panel and putting them up based on their scores so that NERC can go and make a decision based on funding. So the presentation itself, as I said, don't be surprised if you come in and you're immediately, or not immediately, within a couple of minutes asked to start delivering your presentation. And this presentation is an opportunity for you to discuss yourself and your work, set out a clear plan for your research, give evidence of your qualities. And remember that the interview panel will not all be experts in your area. They will be experts in the area of the generic panel, so panel A, panel B, and panel C, but you might not have somebody who is an absolute specific expert in your area. So be mindful when you are responding to interview questions that you might want to phrase them in a way that is more accessible to everyone on the panel. Similarly, if you do have a panel member that is asking a question that isn't clear and sometimes might not be relevant to your area of expertise, please have the confidence to say, that doesn't really matter. That's not something that our community, need to go into that level of detail about. It might just be that they, are trying to assess your part of the science using knowledge that they are comfortable with. When you're doing a presentation as well, everybody's given a 10-minute time cap, and that's just to make sure that things are consistent across all 3 panels. The exception here is if you have accessibility needs and you would require longer than a 10-minute presentation. But when this 10 minutes is going on, you'll be given a visual cue either by a NERC staff or the panel chair that you've got either a couple of minutes left or that you need to bring your presentation to a close. On the whole, most people are good at this. As I said, when you're practicing your presentation, have somebody time you and really cut you off so you've got an idea of how long it is. Usually we don't cut people off, but on the odd occasion, somebody is clearly rambling at 12 minutes and we need to cut them off because it's a tight time schedule and we need to ask those questions. So the question themselves, as I said, don't be surprised on what they're about. They will be based on the criteria. Panel members will ask you questions based on research excellence, which is essentially parts of your research proposal that they're either interested in, want more information on, or just want clarity on. Suitability of the applicant. Don't be surprised by questions that are going to ask you about independence, evidence of leadership or pioneering, development, those types of things. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last year or the previous year, we built in this as part of our criteria, which is about you as individuals who are asking for funding to go and lead in a particular field and will be developing teams and so on. We are going to ask you how you're going to promote diversity, equity, inclusion in the work you do and in the way that you manage and implement your team and your career as you go forward. And finally, you might be asked something around host support. So what training are you being offered? What development opportunities are you being offered? What is your host doing that makes it a good place to go to? Your first questions, though, will always be based off the science that you've been talking about before moving on to those applicant-based questions. And at the very end, you will be given an opportunity to ask your questions, whether they be to the panel or if you've got any questions for NERC. The most frequently asked questions are, when will I hear from you? And questions around networking or additional opportunities and things like that. Post-interview and post-award, the first thing that I can say is, once you have left the interview, relax. Go and try and enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, because I can appreciate the amount of effort and energy that goes into preparing a presentation and an interview is quite overwhelming. And to go through that part of the process afterwards, you deserve to have a time to relax. And because these are all going to be done online, you don't then have to get back on a train from Swindon to wherever it is you need to go. Do it in a setting that makes you feel most comfortable and that is able to give the best account of yourself. Everyone is then contacted by the NERC Fellowship team, whether they are successful or unsuccessful, and everyone will receive feedback from the interview panel. If you are one of those that are successful, then congratulations, and we'll then work with you to get through the grant process, which starts off with an award letter, and then we'll organise a start date with you. Just a note on the start date, the one that you put in your proposal, that's not set in stone. If things have changed since your proposal has been submitted and you might need to change your start date, that's absolutely fine. Come and talk to us, as long as it's within a reasonable window, and we do have UKRI regulations we have to follow. We will make sure that your start date is most reasonable to you. If you're starting your fellowship at a new institute, then we can offer some support about getting you that award letter and engaging with your new head of department. And if there's any particular reporting or grant requirements, then we'll work with you to make sure this is clear in this part of the post-award process. And that kind of brings me to the last slide. So hopefully you found that all interesting and useful, and hopefully that's built on the previous presentation that was trying to demystify the IRF process. As I said before, happy to take any questions and help out in the panels later. I will be in the drop-in room later on, so if you've got any questions, please do come and ask me. Again, reiterate, today is about the interview process, so I'll be answering those questions. If you do have questions about the change in review, then there is a webinar for that. If you do come and ask me, I might try and answer your question, but it will probably be, here's a link to go to the webinar where everything will be responded to there. But thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity, Ray and Matt. I really appreciate you, inviting me to come and speak today.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for such a great talk. We will now move on to the panel discussion. So thanks to everyone for sending in your questions via the registration form. There were lots of really great ones, but we found some common themes between them, and we've narrowed this down into some key questions with 5 themes. The leading questions for these will be pasted in the chat so that you can follow along this way and you know what's coming. And just a reminder that if you have questions that aren't answered now, there'll be an opportunity to ask more questions during the breakout. And I will now invite our panelists to come on, and now we'll move into the panel discussion. So our first theme is about preparing for the interview, and the questions that we have for this are, how should an applicant start to prepare for an IRF interview? Are there any internal departmental opportunities to help with preparation? What's different about the IRF interviews to other fellowship schemes? And what should applicants do if they have minimal support from mentors and departments? And to help us with this question, first we will start with Emily.
Hi, well, I'd say the first thing when you get an interview is to contact your department, because they should really be supporting you through this. And so for me, I had a mock interview with a random selection of the older professors in the department. And that was amazingly useful because none of them knew anything about my field, or if we're honest, cared about it. And I ended up totally restructuring my talk and changing it, because I gave the talk and you could see they're all just kind of slightly switched off, and then one of them kind of clicked onto something I said, and then explained it to the others. And watching that process and watching how to represent my work in a way that resonated with people who were very outside my field was incredibly useful. And yeah, it's very much within your department's interests to help. So you should definitely try to practice with, ideally non-friends, non-colleagues, people who are outside. So that was incredibly useful. I also contacted people within my department who had NERC fellowships. There were 2 of them, and they were both wonderful. They shared their talk slides with me, and they also talked to me about the interview and what happened. This was before it was all online, so I was actually going to Slough, standing in the room. So it's a slightly different sort of thing. But that was very, very useful, both seeing how they presented their work and using that as a get-go. So, and in terms of preparing, it's accumulating questions. So I asked people who've been asked NERC fellowship questions before, but also the careers service had a list of questions, and there were questions from other fellowships, and this was really, really crucial for me. So I accumulated all the questions together and then went through and what I'd say and how I'd talk about it. And I didn't have any mock interviews with anyone. Oh, actually, no, I did. The career service gave me one. And that was useful. They videoed me talking, which again was hideous to watch myself, but incredibly useful. And that was very, very useful, because when it came to the interview, there weren't any questions that surprised me. Everything. So sometimes the phrasing was different to what I'd been practicing, but the kind of essence of the questions were the same. So the whole thing was relatively straightforward on that front. And the other thing that people were talking about is, what should applicants do if they have minimal support from mentors and departments? Well, hopefully no one will be in that position, but don't be afraid to reach out to people kind of outside your departments who've been through the NERC process, or friends and colleagues, yes, outside, that can help you, because it's easily worth speaking to people, even if you're not getting the support that you really do deserve within the department. What's different about the NERC interviews to other fellowship schemes? I wouldn't know. I haven't interviewed for other ones, so I can't really help on that particular front. Yes, so to summarize, I guess you should reach out to your department and get help through them. Careers service can also help. Previous or current NERC fellows can help, and then accumulate questions from previous people, careers service and online, about what fellowship questions are like. Carol, I don't know if you have more to add, I'm sure.
That was a brilliant answer, Emily. That covered everything. I guess a couple of things I would add is really to practice with Zoom. If the interview is going to be over Zoom, then practice having an interview with Zoom, practice giving a presentation to Zoom, practice editing the presentation so it's really punchy and you get the take-home messages across really well. I would go back to first principles. What are the criteria that the panel are going to look at? And what we're looking at is the potential or the suitability to become a world-class researcher. So just have a think. Who do you know who is a world-class researcher? Whose research do you follow? And what do they do? How do you know that they're a world-class researcher? And how can you give evidence that that is where you are going to become? How do you interact? How do you communicate? How do you influence? How do you take initiative and lead? So think about examples of what you do there, because they're the sorts of pieces of evidence that the panel are going to be asking. They want to know that the research is outstanding and that you are suitable to become a world-class researcher.
Great. Thank you so much. These are all really great tips that I'm sure our audience is enjoying learning about. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add before we move on to the next theme?
Yeah, I was just going to say, do practice what you're going to say in answer to the questions. I mean, it sounds really obvious, right? But there's so often you are expecting the question, where are you going to be in 5 or 10 years' time? You know, it's a typical interview question that you'll get every single time you've interviewed for everything. And I always think, yeah, I know what I'm going to say. And then they ask me that question and I go, if you've actually practiced and you've got 3 key points written on a piece of paper in front of you or something, so you know what you're going to say when you get these really obvious questions, and then it sounds sort of confident, rather than just knowing that question's going to come, but not really knowing what you're going to say when they ask it. And it sounds really obvious, but it's something that I don't do very often and I should do more of.
Nice. Any further points before we move on to theme 2? Oh, okay, cool. So the second theme that we have is support from NERC. So what support does NERC provide to applicants before the interview? And Jenny's going to help us out with this one.
Yeah, mainly James has covered most of it, actually, in terms of what support we provide. Obviously, you'll be contacted with, a suggested time of your interview. But as James said, if you have any requirements or reasons that you need that to be at a different time, do get in touch, and we have, some flexibility in that. Also, if you have any requirements for the interview, any adaptations that you need, please get in touch with us as soon as you can, and we can work with you to provide you with the support that you need for your particular interview. We will also provide some Zoom guidance, and as Claire and Carol have suggested, I would definitely recommend trying and playing around with the functions of Zoom. But if anybody needs any support, we can set up some test runs on an individual basis. Also, by sending your presentation in on time, it also means that we have a copy of that in case you have any technical issues at the interview, so we can share that with the panel if, say, for example, you have to dial in rather than connecting. And we also another tip is we also publish usually the panel membership as well on the web, so this is a way for you to know in advance who is going to be on the panel, so you can get an idea about what kind of the expertise of the people who are going to be interviewing you. But I think the main thing really is that if you have any questions, any concerns, please do get in touch. Don't be afraid to contact NERC, because we're here to support you. I think that's everything. If anyone has any other questions.
Thanks so much for raising these things, Jenny. They're all really important. Yeah, do any panelists have anything else they'd like to add before we move on? No? Okay, so we're on to theme 3. So this is all about selling your skills. So what should an applicant highlight most in an IRF interview, particularly if an applicant doesn't have a traditional, in inverted commas, academic background? And for this question, we're going to start with Carol.
Thanks, Matt. So I guess I would go back to the criteria of excellent, outstanding research and suitability to become a world-class leader, and think about what you might have done that gives evidence that perhaps you've taken the initiative in something, perhaps you've recognized a problem or a challenge and you've brought people together to solve that problem. Perhaps you're known as an expert in something, so that's a recognition. People come to you for advice. Perhaps you've mentored or trained or supervised someone to learn a new skill or a new piece of knowledge. Perhaps you've communicated or presented to a wide range of audiences, whether it's school children or the general public or policymakers or government. Can you see the wider perspective, the societal big picture of your research? Can you put it into the context? Can you communicate it to, I don't know, the taxi driver or the bus driver as you go into the interview? So think laterally. We need evidence that you're suitable to become a world-class leader, and in anything that you've done, whether or not it's a traditional academic background, these types of initiative, leadership, solving problems, mentoring, communicating, all of these things, I'm sure you can find examples in your wider activities if you don't already have them in a traditional academic background. I hope that's helped.
Yeah, and I was thinking as well about, yeah, it's basically the panel's looking for the evidence that you can do what you say you're going to do. That evidence doesn't have to be traditional evidence. So you might have worked in a supermarket. You've used skills in that supermarket to help other people that's exactly the same as you need in science. So you can use evidence for these skills and experiences outside academia to help illustrate that, yes, you can do what you say you're going to do and you can deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Or that you recognise that you don't have that particular skill, but that you've put into place the right network of mentors and people who are going to help train you to get those skills into place, and that you have evidence from other lines of your background that show you can learn these new complicated things, and you can pull together evidence from different parts of your life and experience to show that you have the capacity to do that. So it's just about thinking a bit more outside the box of you know, traditional academic career, whatever. I don't even know what a traditional academic career looks like these days, but you know, it's in some cases it's easy to show the evidence. In other places the evidence is there, but it will just be a bit more creative to demonstrate that. But basically the panel are looking for the fact that you know what you're doing, you've got help to get there if you need that help, and that you are actually going to do the things that you are going to be able to do, the things that you say you're going to be able to do. So that's basically it, is the evidence. Think about how you're going to demonstrate that evidence, and that should be absolutely fine. And it's much more interesting to talk to a bunch of people who've got different backgrounds than it is to talk to people who've all got the same background, so it gets really boring after a while. So yeah, don't be put off applying just because you think, oh, I haven't got a traditional background. That's absolutely, the new future leaders are not all going to come from Eton and study PPE.
So I would say for my interview, at least, I was asked a few times in a few different ways, kind of why what I was doing was both different to my PhD supervisor and previous PI. Like, you know, how have I demonstrated independence from him? How am I unique? What makes me special? Which as a Brit is quite hard, because we all know that we work very much within a team, and we you know, very much appreciate the different aspects people add to working together. But you need to think, why are your skill sets different from someone else's? What makes you different? And the one that I found trickiest to answer is like, who are your competitors in the field? And why are you different? Why are you better, essentially, is what they're asking, which is, again, something which is very counterintuitive. But what it's trying to get at, again, is like, why, what, you know, they don't, the impression I got is they don't want to give them to people who are just kind of doing a very standard set things. They want to give them to people who have got a new way of looking at things, a new approach to things, that are going to be doing things in a slightly different way. I mean, as scientists, we're all doing that all the time to some extent, but it's very much emphasizing the independence aspects and why you are different from specifically your PhD supervisors in their group. And then as Claire and Karen said, it's all about evidence of this, which, yes, sometimes is easier and sometimes it's harder.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of your insights into this part of the process. Does anyone have any further points before we move on to theme 4? No. Okay, we will move on. So theme 4 is all about the interview structure, which James has touched on very briefly, and I will go into a bit more detail. So for this theme, we have 3 questions. What is the structure of an IRF interview? What types of questions do panelists ask? And what do NERC staff do in an interview, and what support do they provide? And to start us off with this question, Claire will join us.
Yes, I think James went through the structure pretty well. They're pretty formulaic. You know, we go through, I think it's 6, sometimes even 7 in a day. So, you know, it's the presentation, then the questions, and then that's the end of the process for you guys. And then the panelists sit and discuss afterwards. So the science type questions tend to come first. So there might be a question or two about a specific aspect of your presentation, or a specific aspect that a reviewer, oh no, there won't be reviewers. Okay, normally it would be a specific aspect the reviewer had picked up, but in that case, there'll be an aspect that the panel has picked up that they want to ask further clarification on. And most of these questions are designed to ensure that you're the one who knows your science. Basically, that you haven't got someone else to write the proposal for you. And it's basically as simple as that. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know how you're going to get there? Have you thought through all the pitfalls, all the risks? You might be asked, you know, what's the riskiest part of the project and how are you going to get past that? Or, how about this other paper that's been written about this thing? How does your proposal differ from this? Sort of, yeah, very specific actually to your science and what you've presented on, and the kinds of, so you should hopefully have an idea of maybe where the pitfalls are or where the risks are. And you'll know your science inside out because you would have spent weeks writing the thing and reading all the papers about it. And these questions are generally not the tricky ones to answer. And then there'll be the questions about you, you know, show us the evidence that you've got the capability to deliver, you've got the right support in place, that you're going to get the right help you need to develop the skills that you're missing. How are you going to build your network? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to bring in interdisciplinarity from other places? And how are you going to position yourself as the very niche leader, the world leader in this one thing where you're drawing all these other bits together to be you rather than your PhD supervisor or the people you've worked with before? You know, what's the new little niche thing that you're going to be known for? So it's the sort of general process is fairly generic and formulaic. All the questions will be basically about the criteria that are in the proposal guidance that you are looking at when you're writing the proposal. So it's quite, yeah, there won't be anything that's specifically going to catch you out, as James was saying, and everybody will be asked the same set of questions. But certainly when I was doing the questioning a couple of years ago, the question that most caught people off guard was, how are you going to build a diverse and inclusive team around you? That kind of question about the equality, diversity, and inclusion, because nobody was really expecting it. But you know, as the world's moved on over the last couple of years, it'll be really unusual for you not to get a question like that in your interview. So think about that. And what do NERC staff do in an interview? Well, I guess I'll hand that over to Jenny and James.
Yeah, so we usually have at least a couple of NERC staff in the interview. There'll be a panel secretary, and their role is really to host the meeting. And they will be organising, you know, the waiting room and bringing you in and letting you know, how we're getting along with the scheduling and things like that. And then there will also be James as the lead as well of the fellowships scheme, and he's there to kind of support the panel maybe around policies and also to answer some of your questions at the end of your interview. So really, NERC staff aren't really there to assess your proposal. That's the panel's job. We're just there to sort of support the meeting, and so generally speaking, we'll turn our cameras off and be muted through most of your interview. We might make a few notes and things, but generally we're there to just make sure that things are running to time as well. You may get a NERC staff member just letting you know when your 10 minutes for your presentation is up, but generally speaking, we kind of sit back and let the panel and the chair run things. If there are any technical issues as well, we'll step in to support. So if you've sent your presentation ahead of schedule and there's an issue with it, you know, there's an option for us to share your presentation, you'll share our screen, things like that. And yeah, like I said, we're also available then at the end for any questions that you have directly to NERC. Yeah, I think that was everything that I wanted to say around that.
Thanks, Jenny. So I just wanted to sort of tell people what the chair's there for. So the chair really is like the conductor of an orchestra. They have the overview of what's happening, and they're there to make sure that all the applicants are interviewed fairly and consistently, and that the appropriate questions are asked to make sure that we have all of the information in order to make an informed assessment. So that's why it's really important to keep to time, to make sure that the range of questions are asked, that the candidate has the opportunity to give evidence over a range of things and not to get down a rabbit hole on one particular detail of the science. So it's usually the chair that welcomes the candidate, introduces themselves, usually congratulates you. Actually, don't underestimate how brilliant you've been to get to an interview, and that's a real thing to you know, to celebrate. The chair will then outline the structure of the interview. So as James said, the first thing that will happen is you'll be allowed to start your presentation. After the presentation, either myself or a NERC person will give some indication of the timing. So I usually give a 2-minute warning perhaps, but there'll be some way to make sure that you don't overrun too much. Then the chair will hand over to the 2 panelists who are the experts in the topic. And as Claire said, they will be asking questions about the research proposal and the science and how you'll undertake the science. There might be 2 or more other questioners who will then ask questions on the broader suitability of the candidate. Again, the chair is watching and keeping things to time, checking that everything's covered, and then taking back the questioning. So the candidate, the chair often asks the final questions and gives the candidate the opportunity to ask them any questions before handing over to the NERC personnel, who often talk about, you know, what's going to happen next, when are you going to hear, what sort of opportunities do NERC provide for NERC fellows. So a conductor of an orchestra, that's me.
Nice. Would anyone else on the panel like to add anything for theme 4? No? Okay.
I guess just you might get a question from a member of the panel who's not an expert in the area, but is just really interested in your science. But they might ask the question in a way that seems a bit trivial to you because you know your science really well and they don't. So like imagine a glaciologist asking a metamorphic petrologist what a garnet looks like, for example. It'll be something like that. And that can really sort of throw you a bit because you're just a bit like, are you testing me that I know what I'm talking about, or are you really don't know? But actually most of the time they really don't know, and they're just asking a question because they're curious and interested. So I got a question like that on my very first NERC fellowship interview. I was talking about shear zones, and they were going, how might you know what shear zone looks like in the field? And I was sort of like, every structural geologist knows what a shear zone looks like in the field. But then I realized that they were completely different set of, you know, they come from somewhere else, and they were actually curious. What do you look for in the field when you're looking at a shear zone? And then it made more sense to answer that question. But sometimes there can be a few questions like that, and they're not trying to check that you really know what you're talking about. They're just curious and they don't really understand the project at all, or come from the left field. So you might get a question or 2 like that, but it's normally out of curiosity and not out of a sense of trying to catch you out, which should never be a sense of trying to catch you out. But yeah, sometimes the questions you're just a bit like, whoa, where did that come from? But that might have just been my experience. I don't know, Emily, did you get anything like that?
No, I didn't actually. I was quite. It was relatively straightforward, so I was quite fortunate in that respect. But I think I'd been quite well warned that people can ask quite out their questions. And actually, when I was practicing, I had a lot of them then.
Great, thank you so much. We've also just had 1 question through, which I feel like fits in with this thing quite nicely, about how important is it to ask a question at the end of the interview?
It shows that you're engaged with the process, and there's nearly always something that you're burning to ask. So, you know, even if it's like, when might I hear, or what's the next step? Ask something like that. It's sort of, it sort of shows that you're engaged with the process and that you kind of want to know and you're invested in the outcome. You don't have to ask a question. If everything's been covered in the interview already, just say, thank you, the guidance I've had from NERC has been excellent. I have no further questions, and that's fine. But if you do have something you want to ask, then ask it. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And it helps to round off everything and makes it feel a little bit more even-sided, that you're not just sitting there answering questions. You actually have the opportunity to ask something as well. Carol, I don't know if you as sort of chair have anything further to add on that one.
No, I mean, if you've got a question, then please ask it. If everything's covered, then you don't need to ask a question. We won't give you a mark whether or not you give a question. It's entirely that, you know, it's an opportunity for you, as Claire says, to engage in a discussion, in a conversation, and not to go away thinking, oh, I wish I'd asked that. But of course, if you do go away and you remember something, then you can just email and ask it. It's not the end of the world.
I mean, for what it's worth, I didn't ask any questions, but I did say, you know, all the information was available online. The question I wanted to ask, which I don't think would have been appropriate, which is like, why are you not allowed to ask for a PhD student or a postdoc on the grant? Because to me, if you're building your group, that's one of the kind of most easy ways that the NERC fellowship scheme could support you, and it doesn't happen. But I didn't ask, and it's still unknown to me.
Well, I would have thought that's an excellent question. To me, that shows that you're thinking, you're planning, and you're questioning. You're not taking for granted something that somebody's telling you. You're saying, you know, if you want me to build a group, then help me by giving me a PhD student. I would have thought that was a great question.
Okay, it's good to know. I thought it was a bit rude, but that's okay.
Thanks so much for answering the question that came in. So our last theme, which will be a shorter one. So if an applicant is unsuccessful, what should they do next? And to start us off, Emily will join us.
So I'm very much of the opinion, if you're going to the effort of writing a rather substantial proposal, you should apply for literally every single one you can find. So the kind of NERC and the Royal Society are the obvious ones, and you've also got Leverhulme Trust, and there are a few others, kind of 1823, I think it is. But I think the really key bit of information is, I know a lot of people who've you know, get their NERC fellowship on the second or third, or one case fourth time, and you learn as you're doing it. You learn how to represent what you're interested in, and your ideas develop, you know, as time goes on, as you publish more research, you do more research. So I think the key thing is that it's, you know, there are so many really good people. To some extent, if you're being interviewed, you know you're kind of up there in the right sort of mindset, and it does kind of come down to luck to some extent. And so you absolutely shouldn't give up. It's important to kind of pick yourself up, obviously spend some time commiserating, but to then to you know, think about how you can improve, think about the feedback you've got, and reapply the following year. I think that's really important, is that it is so difficult to choose between people being interviewed, you know, in that top bracket. There will be lots of people who are very good and very fundable that unfortunately just miss out. So yeah, don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say exactly the same. I think being where we are is 10% luck, 80% resilience. It's awful when you get rejected, and you need to have a mechanism, have a plan for, you know, how you look after yourself, how you commiserate, how you go for a long walk, switch off from things, just clear the head, but say, right, swear word, I'll show you. And you come back in a few days time, you look through the feedback, you have a think, oh yeah, that was quite a good thing they've told me, I can improve there, or I still don't agree with that, but you know, I don't agree with that, and apply again. And as Emily said, apply for anything that's appropriate. Just don't give up, be resilient, gradually you stop crying so much. It doesn't, you know, gradually you get thick skin, but it still hurts, you know, 30 years later. If you don't get what you apply for, it's still annoying, but you just have to batter away. Don't give up and try again.
Yeah, I think one of my my failings is not trying again, is trying to come up with new ideas all the time. But actually, if an old idea is not funded the first time round, just dust it off. The idea is still good. If feedback will be there. There'll be some other paper that's published where you think, oh, perfect. That's the evidence I need, because that was a bit ropey, to show that it could actually be done. Bish bash bosh, send it in again. Yeah, I mean, even so, all the people who are invited for interview are all fundable, and quite a few of the people who don't get invited for interview because there isn't enough space on the interview list is also totally fundable. So it's not that you're not good enough, it's just that you're unlucky most of the time, because it's just really competitive, and there just isn't enough funding to fund everybody. And you know, when you get to the point that in the normal standard grants, you've got to get like 9.9 out of 10 to even think about getting funding, and then there's not enough funding to cover all of those, it's ridiculous. So it is a little bit of a lottery. So just keep at it, keep trying, and use the same idea multiple times in other ways, and one of them will come off. And if you're really lucky, two will come off at once and you get a choice. But yeah, just but yeah, have a beverage of your choice, or a piece of food of your choice, or something, just to steal you through that afternoon after you get the email. And it always comes in on a Friday evening or some unfortunate time where you just think, thanks, you've just ruined my weekend. Yeah, but anyway, just keep at it.
Thanks so much for answering this last theme. So that also brings us to the end of our panel discussion. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for having such awesome conversations, and for posing really great points, which I really hope all of you find really reassuring in the audience.